The wind doesn't talk much in the high country of Wyoming, but it knows how to listen. It whistles through the gaps in the timber, like it's searching for secrets a man thought he'd buried years ago. Silas Thorne was one of those men. At 54, his face was a map of hard winters and even harder choices. He lived 4 miles from a nearest neighbor and 10 miles from anything you'd call a town. Take a second to hit that subscribe button and give this story a like. Silas liked the silence. It didn't ask questions. It didn't demand explanations for why a former deputy U.S. Marshal would trade his badge for a shovel and a piece of land that yielded more rocks than hay. That morning, the air was thin and sharp, the kind that bites at your lungs and reminds you you're still breathing. Silas was out by the north fence line, mending a section that a bull elk had torn down in the night. He was leaning into work, his hands callous and stained with cedar oil, tugging the wire taut. Then he heard it. It wasn't a horse. It wasn't the wind. It was a stumble, a heavy, rhythmic dragging sound coming from a tree lean. Silas didn't reach for his tool belt. He reached for the Winchester 73 leaning against the fence post. He didn't cock it. Not yet. He just waited, his boots planted deep in the dirt, his eyes narrowed against the glare of the morning sun. Out of the shadows of the pines, she appeared. She wasn't walking so much as she was failing forward. Her dress was blue calico, or it had been once. Now it was the color of dust and dried copper. She had no shoes. Her feet were swollen, the skin broken and caked in the dark, rich soil of the valley. But it was her face that made Silas's grip tighten on the rifle. She didn't scream when she saw him. She didn't even stop. She took 2 more steps, her eyes locked onto his with terrifying intensity, and then her knees simply gave out. Silas was moving before she hit the grass. He dropped the Winchester, something he hadn't done in 20 years, and caught her just before her head struck the stones. She was light, too light, like a bird with broken wings. "Please," she whispered. Her voice was a dry rattle, like dead leaves on a porch. "Don't let him find the box." Then her eyes rolled back, and the silence of the high country came rushing back in. Silas carried her back to the cabin. He didn't go through the front door. He went through the back, his eyes scanning the horizon for the dust clouds that usually followed a woman in this condition. Someone was hunting her. You didn't get that exhausted, that broken, unless death was riding a fast horse behind you. He laid her on the narrow cot near the wood stove. He built a fire, not for the cold, but for the comfort of the sound. The crackle of pine was the only heartbeat the room had for a long time. He fetched a basin of warm water and a clean cloth. As he began to wash the grime from her face, he saw the marks, fingerprints, bruised deep into the pale skin of her neck, a jagged cut across her forehead that had been poorly tended. Silas had spent a lifetime looking at the work of bad men. He knew a predator's signature when he saw it. As he moved to clean the deep gashes on her feet, a small, heavy object fell from the folds of her tattered dress. It hit the floor with a dull thud. It was a tin box, wrapped in oilskin and bound with a leather thong. It looked ordinary, but the way she had clutched it, even in her sleep, told Silas it was anything but. He didn't open it. He placed it on the table next to his coffee tin. Hours passed. The sun moved across the floorboards like a slow-moving ghost. Silas sat in his rocking chair, the Winchester across his lap, watching the tree lean through the window. He didn't drink. He didn't eat. He just waited. Later that afternoon, she stirred. Her head turned, her green eyes finding him. There was no confusion, only a sharp, cold fear. "Where is it?" she asked, her voice slightly stronger. "On the table," Silas said. "Safe." She looked at the box, then back at him. She took in the gray hair, the steady hands, and the way he held the rifle, like it was an extension of his own arm. "You're a lawman," she said. It wasn't a question. "I was a lot of things," Silas replied. "Right now, I'm just a man with a broken fence and a guest I don't know the name of." She looked away, toward the fire. "My name is Clara, and the man coming for me. He owns the law in the valley below." Silas felt a familiar coldness settle in his gut, the kind of cold that usually preceded a gunfight. If you're still here, sitting by the fire with Silas and Clara, Maybe you know what it's like to stand between someone and a storm. These stories of the West aren't just about the dust. They're about the grit it takes to do the right thing when it's easier to walk away. If you're enjoying this journey, take a second to hit that subscribe button and give this story a like. It helps us keep these old trails open. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from today? Is it morning where you are, or is the sun dipping low like it is on Silas's ranch? Clara drank the coffee Silas gave her like it was life itself. It was bitter and black, but it brought the color back to her cheeks. She told him the story in short, jagged sentences. She had been a ledger keeper for a man named Elias Vance. Vance was a name Silas knew, a man who bought land with blood and sold it for gold. He owned the cattle of the sheriff, and most of the judges from here to Cheyenne. I saw the books, Silas, she said, her voice trembling. The real ones. He isn't just a rancher. He's been diverting the water rights from the homesteaders. He's been drying them out, forcing them to sell for pennies, and then killing the ones who refuse. My husband was one of the ones who refused. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, the only sound was the wind hooting in the chimney. I took the proof, she continued, gesturing to the tin box, the signatures, the contracts, everything. I ran into the hills because I knew he couldn't follow me with a whole posse, not without making it look like a crime. He told the town I killed my husband. He told them I stole his payroll. Silas looked at the woman. She didn't look like a killer. She looked like a woman who had been pushed until she found the wall, and then decided to push back. He'll be here, Silas said. He has 3 regulars, she said. Men who don't ask questions. They're trackers. They would have found my trail by noon. Silas stood up. His joints popped, a reminder of the miles he'd put on his own body. He walked to the window. The shadows were getting long. The golden hour in the west is beautiful, but it's a lie. It's just the darkness getting its boots on. You should leave, Clara whispered. He'll burn this place down just to get to me. You don't owe me anything. Silas didn't turn around. He started cleaning his revolver. I had a wife once, Clara, a long time ago. She used to say that the only thing necessary for evil to win was for a good man to decide his fence was more important than his soul. He looked at her then, a small, grim smile on his face. My fence is already broken. Not much left to lose. The riders didn't come with a roar. They came like smoke. Silas saw the dust first, a thin ribbon 3 miles out. Then, the glint of sunlight on a rifle barrel. He moved Clara to the cellar, a small, cramped space on the floorboards where he kept his winter potatoes. Don't make a sound, he told her, no matter what you hear. He walked out onto the porch. He didn't hide. He sat in his rocking chair, the Winchester leaning against the railing and a tin cup of cold coffee in his hand. He looked for all the world like a retired man enjoying the sunset. The 3 riders pulled up at the gate. They were well-mounted, their gear expensive and clean. Too clean for honest work. The man in the middle wore a silver star on a sheepskin vest. Sheriff Miller. Evening, Silas, Miller called out. He didn't dismount. He kept his hand near his holster. Sheriff, Silas nodded. A bit far from your jurisdiction, aren't you? This is federal land up here. Hunting a fugitive, Miller said, his eyes scanning the cabin. A woman killed her husband and robbed a good man. Tracks lead right to your gate. I saw a lot of tracks today, Silas said calmly. Elk, deer, a mountain lion over by the creek. Didn't see no woman. The rider to the sheriff's left, a man with a scarred face and a mean-looking bay horse, spat in the dirt. The cabin smells like fresh coffee, Miller, and there's a blue scrap of cloth on the fence line. He's lying. The tension in the air was so thick you could cut it with a Bowie knife. Silas didn't move. He didn't blink. Step aside, Silas, Miller said, his voice dropping the facade of friendliness. Don't make this a funeral. It's already a funeral, Miller, Silas said. You just haven't realized you're the one in the pine box. Silas moved faster than a man his age should have been able to. He didn't go for the rifle. He dived off the porch as the first volley of lead tore through the wood of his rocking chair. He hit the dirt, rolled, and came up with his colt. Crack! Crack! The rider on the left fell from his saddle without a sound, his foot catching in the stirrup as his horse bolted. Silas scrambled for the corner of the barn. Bullets kicked up geysers of dust at his heels. He felt the heat of one pass, so close to his ear it felt like a brand. He reached to cover the heavy timber and leaned back, his breath coming in hard, jagged gasps. He heard Miller shouting orders. They were splitting up, one coming around the back, Miller staying in the front. Silas waited. He counted the seconds. He heard the soft crunch of gravel to his right. He spun, firing low. The second rider yelped, clutching his thigh as he tumbled into the watering trough. But Miller was a veteran of the range. He didn't stay in the open. A sudden, sharp thwack sounded behind Silas. He felt a shove, like someone had slammed a fist into his shoulder blade. It didn't hurt. Not really. It just felt cold. He spun and fired at the flash of Miller's muzzle in the darkening tree-line. He heard a groan, the sound of man crashing to brush, and then silence. The wind picked up. The sun was gone now, leaving the world in a bruised purple twilight. Silas leaned against the barn wall. He felt strangely heavy. He walked back toward the cabin, his boots feeling like they were made of lead. The door creaked open. Clara emerged from the shadows of the porch, her face pale. She ran to him, catching him as he stumbled. She helped him sit down on the steps. "Is it over?" she whispered, her hand shaking as she touched his. Clara moved behind him to help him take off his coat, but she stopped. He heard her breath hitch, a small, terrified sound. "Silas," she whispered. Her voice was trembling, so hard the words almost broke. "What is it, girl?" She reached out, her fingers coming away dark and wet in the moonlight. She held him up so he could see. "Is that your blood or mine?" she whispered. Silas looked down at her hand. Then he looked at the front of his own shirt. It was clean. He reached around, touching the small of his back, and felt the warm, sticky flooding of his clothes. He looked at her, his eyes widening as the adrenaline finally began to ebb away, leaving a searing, white-hot pain in its wake. "I'll be damned," he wheezed, a ghost of a laugh escaping his lips. "I think it's mine." He looked down at the porch, watching the dark stains spread across the wood he'd swept just that morning. He'd been shot in the back, and for the first time in his life, Silas Thorne felt the world start to go gray at the edges. Silas didn't die that night. Clara wouldn't let him. She was a woman who had lost a husband to a bullet, and she wasn't about to lose her savior to one. She dragged him inside. She used the whiskey from his cupboard and the silk from her own petticoat. She dug the lead out with a paring knife, while he gripped the leg of the kitchen table until it would splintered. He screamed once, a sound that echoed off the hills and probably told the coyotes to stay clear. Then he passed out. When he woke up, it was 3 days later. The sun was streaming through the window, smelling of pine and melting snow. He felt like he'd been run over by a freight train, but he was alive. Clara was sitting at the table. She was cleaning the Winchester. She looked different. The fear was gone, replaced by a quiet, iron-hard resolve. "Miller's horse came back to town," she said, not looking up from the rifle. "The deputy found him in the brush. He's alive, but he won't be walking for a long time. They're calling it an ambush by outlaws." "And the box?" Silas asked, his voice a mere shadow. "I sent it," she said. "The stagecoach driver is a cousin of my husband's. It's on its way to the governor in Cheyenne. By next week, Elias Vance will have more than a lone woman to worry about." She stood up and walked his bedside. She handed him a cup of coffee. It was bitter. It was strong. It was perfect. "Why didn't you leave?" Silas asked. "You could have taken a horse and been gone while I was out." Clara looked at him, and for the first time, she smiled. It wasn't a big smile, but it reached her eyes. "I told you, Silas. You gave me space to save myself. I figured the least I could do was give you a reason to keep breathing. The West is a hard place. It breaks the weak and it tries the strong. But every once in a while, it brings two broken things together and builds something that can't be torn down." Silas and Clara stayed on that ranch. They mended the fence, together this time. The town talked, of course. They called it a scandal, then they called it a mystery. And finally, they just called it the Thorne Place. Elias Vance didn't go to jail. Men like that rarely do. But his contract were voided, his water rights were seized, and he moved east within the year. Some say he was scared of the ghost of a lawman who wouldn't stay dead. So, I'll leave you with a question. If a stranger came to your door, bleeding and hunted, would you look at your broken fence? Or would you look at the person? Sometimes, the things we think are our burdens, the past, the scars, the regrets, are the very things that make us strong enough to stand in the gap for someone else. If this story meant something to you, give it a like. It helps more than you know. And if you want to ride with us through more of these real rough tales of the Old West, hit that subscribe button. Take a deep breath. Pour yourself another cup. And remember, out here, the stories don't end. They just keep riding. Until the next time, keep your eyes on the horizon and your hands steady. We'll see you on the next trail.